How's it going, everyone? Got quite a lot to go over from a sales statistics standpoint. Games underwhelming, games doing incredibly well. A lot of data to go over, and I'll give you guys my input as well. It's been quite the discussion point recently that Final Fantasy titles, the recent ones, Final Fantasy 16 and 7 Rebirth, have done underwhelming as far as sales numbers are concerned, and they haven't reached the targets that Square Enix set out for them. I think you guys know exactly where I'm gonna go with this as far as why they didn't reach the targets, and it's something that I absolutely hate that Sony does, and Square Enix as well. Like, Square Enix goes with Sony, but we'll talk about that. And then Helldivers 2 kinda showcases, pushing back on Sony's exclusivity that Helldivers 2 has done exceedingly well. Obviously, totally different games, but there's a lot to go over, so let's talk about it. First of all, coming from Takashi Mochizuki, Square Enix said that Final Fantasy 16 sales fell short of expectations. Initial momentum was in line with expectations, but the games failed to reach fiscal year goal as its momentum slowed. No updates from sales numbers last announced at 3 million. FF7 Rebirth sales fell short of expectations. Initial momentum didn't reach an internal target. No sales number to share. Foam Stars fell short. Remains confident FF16 can achieve its goal over the original 18-month sales plan. I imagine that PC release is going to help quite a bit. Also did note sales of Rebirth and Foam Stars aren't necessarily bad. Reorganized development team into 5 console teams, 1 smartphone game team, has been relied too much on an individual's creativity. Will promote sharing game making how among teams and will seek best balance of individual creativity and organizational discipline. Dragon Quest XII remains under development. Okay, so let's break this down. First of all, you have to have tempered expectations when it comes to timed exclusivity and releasing a game on one platform. That is the reality, especially when you're talking about FF16 and FF7 Rebirth, both being PlayStation 5 only titles, not on PS4. And while I would say that at this point, if you want a PlayStation 5, you have a PlayStation 5, it's not that difficult to get. You're still working with a limited install base. On top of that, if anybody was expecting FF7 Rebirth to reach the sales numbers of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, you are absolutely out of your mind. First of all, Final Fantasy VII Remake came out in 2020, 7 years into the life cycle of the PlayStation 4. Oh, by the way, everyone was indoors and the world had gone to hell, and gaming was gonna be one of the escapes. But, even outside of that, you're talking about a much larger install base. The first game in the series, which Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I don't care what Square Enix says, you have to play the remake. Like, that is the be-all, end-all. Nobody is buying the 7 Rebirth Part 2 without playing and beating 7 Remake. That is just going to give you a smaller install base to work with. Not to mention, you factually have a smaller install base to work with, being that it's on PlayStation 5 versus PS4 7 years in. Final Fantasy 16, on the other hand, the initial 3 million copies sold I thought was great, but I think at the end of all of this, what we have to realize, you guys have to take advantage of the PC gaming market. That is just the reality of the world we are living in now. If you want these games to do even better in the West, they gotta be released on PC. And yes, you are taking the money from Sony and you are doing a delayed release on PC. At that point, you are lessening the value of the game. It'll sell well on PC, but it's not gonna do as well as it could have. Look, it's hindsight being 2020, and we can't analyze what-if scenarios, but we're gonna talk about Helldivers 2, and if you think Helldivers 2 would do as well as it is doing without a PC release, you are absolutely out of your mind. Let's at least try it. Square Enix, I implore you, at least try it. Drop Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 17, whenever it is, day one on PC, day one on PlayStation, day one on Xbox as well, even though it's going to sell 5 copies on Xbox. Still, you're going to get more sales out of it. I don't know how much Sony is paying for this timed exclusivity, but it has to be a ridiculous amount for it to actually be valuable, because if you release the game on PC, you would have another significant amount of people that would be talking about the game. It would be free promotion on social media. That is the reality of gaming in 2024 and how these games get over to a larger audience. People need to be talking about them. People need to be excited about it. The community needs to be excited about it. And when you have more and more people talking about a game online, it's just going to make that game even bigger. That's exactly what happened with Helldivers 2. And again, I don't know how much Sony is paying for it, but if it's anything under $100 million for Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth timed exclusivity, it's gotta be around $100 million. Anything less than that, Square Enix is getting fleeced at this point, because Sony should be incentivizing you for timed exclusivity. Okay, we'll lose out on all these sales, but we're bringing the game to your platform. Yes, there's the argument of it's being developed for one platform, and they can focus in on development, and it makes development a little bit easier. I don't know the exact layers of how much more difficult it would be to create a PC release concurrently, but you are sacrificing sales, and you're putting those games out on PC anyway, over time. And it's just one of those things, like Sony's seeing it as well. These 2-year delayed releases, yeah, they will sell copies. They'll do okay, but you're not maximizing your return. It's one thing where Sony still is very much in the console market, and they need to invest the consumer. They need to get people invested into PlayStation as a brand. Square Enix could give an F about PlayStation as a brand. They gotta think about themselves. They gotta get their IPs as popular as possible, and you have to adjust to the current gaming ecosystem, and PC gaming is bigger than ever, and people buying these major releases on PC. So from a Square Enix standpoint, they gotta start dropping these games on PC day one. At the very least, at least then we can have data and see whether or not it would be effective, because Final Fantasy 15 had a delayed release on PC 16 months later, and that was 6 years ago. PC gaming is much bigger now than it was 6 years ago, and Square Enix needs to catch up with the times if they want these games to do as good as possible. FF16 will do okay on PC, but not as good as if you drop the game day one. We all know this, and I don't know how juicy that Sony paycheck is coming from Sony directly, but again, if it's anything less than $100 million, because I would think that FF16 day one on PC easily sells 1.5 to 2 million copies. I don't think that's a stretch. Maybe that's a little bit too optimistic, but again, Sony should be incentivizing Square Enix to make up for the sales that they could have potentially had on PC, and then some, because they are in the driver's seat. They could just release their games on PS5 and PC. PlayStation has to win them over, so you have to make up for the sales and pay on top of that. That's how this works if you want an effective timed exclusivity deal, and if it's anything less than $100 million, I'm sorry, I don't think it's worth it. And again, this is me as a schmuck talking about timed exclusivity deals. I'm sure there's other layers to the agreement being made. This is just from my lens, and if these games are falling short of expectations, try releasing them on PC day one. Try releasing it on Xbox, Switch 2. I don't know. Try to get that going, and I think that will incentivize people and make people care about the IP more, because when you're limiting it to just PlayStation 5, that's gonna limit the ceiling of the IP. Releasing the games as an exclusive. I totally understand why PlayStation, as a console manufacturer, they want to get their Stellar Blades, games that they are publishing as exclusives, because that gets people to invest into their console. Square Enix shouldn't give a damn about whether or not people are invested into PlayStation, because they're not seeing anything outside of whatever that amount of money that Sony is giving them for this timed exclusivity. Unless we know that amount of money, I can't really come to a definitive conclusion on whether or not who's winning this deal. I'm just giving you guys, from my lens, this arbitrary number of $100 million, because I feel like that's what Sony should be paying at minimum to get these games as timed exclusives. But again, I am not an expert at this. I don't know the ins and outs of these business dealings, and again, I don't know the ins and outs of game development as well, but I can't imagine it is orders of magnitude more difficult to do a concurrent development for a PC release, because a lot of developers have done it. It's not like it's been rocket science for developers to figure it out, but I digress on that. Moving on from that, because this goes hand in hand, Helldivers 2, how about that, has sold over 12 million copies as of May 5th, a new record for PlayStation. Need I say more? Because if this game was released on PlayStation alone, it would not be anywhere close to 12 million copies. You are absolutely out of your mind if you think it is sniffing 12 million copies if it's a PlayStation 5 only release. It's not even coming close. It might be at half of that. Literally, it might be at less than half of that. I think putting it at half that would be pretty optimistic thinking. Now, Helldivers is certainly a different game than Final Fantasy, but I also think PC gamers are more so inclined to check out games like Final Fantasy these days. Not as much as a Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is a game that really is what a large portion of the PC audience looks for, and it's a live service title. It's a different ball game than comparing it directly to Final Fantasy, but if anybody thinks this game is doing as successful as a PlayStation-only title, you're out of your mind, and it's something to look at. I think Helldivers 2 is a case study where it is going to be a case-by-case basis, and Sony themselves, when they are publishing a game, I totally understand from their lens why they want a Stellar Blade exclusive, why they want a Ronin as an exclusive, but for Square Enix, who they are a third party, and for them, it should be an imperative to make sure their IPs are as popular as possible, even if they have to turn down that juicy Sony paycheck. I think it would be incredibly advantageous for them to restructure into releasing their games multi-platform. Xbox is whatever, like Xbox, I just don't see Final Fantasy selling incredibly well. I think on PC, a game like Final Fantasy 16, especially when that game was designed more so to win over a non-Final Fantasy fan, would have done exceedingly well on PC, and I just don't know if that's going to be the case when the momentum has died down and now you're going to drop the game on PC a year later. I do think that luster is gone. I think that luster is going to be gone when Stellar Blade eventually sees its PC release as well, but the difference with Stellar Blade is it's a PlayStation-published game, and it's very much PlayStation's desire and want to keep their console and their player base as invested into that console as possible. Square Enix should not care about that whatsoever, and they should be moving more so to a multi-platform release structure. And I know that'll, cause some ire within the PlayStation community. Again, PlayStation dropping their exclusives, absolutely. And if they pay a significant amount to Square Enix to get their games as exclusive, that's one thing. But if that's the case, you have to go into it expecting lower sales. And in the case of FF7 Rebirth, again, I just think there are so many circumstances that cause that game to do less than Remake, and I think that was to be expected. But that's gonna do it for me. Interested to hear what you guys think. I know rambled quite a bit, but I do think it's some information that I feel pretty strongly about. I think third parties, they should absolutely be going to a multi-platform release structure. And I saw somebody in a recent video say that timed exclusives were good for the consumer, and I'm just like bewildered, baffled that people can even come to that sort of conclusion. Like, that's wild to me. Timed exclusives absolutely suck. It's one thing when PlayStation's funding a game, do whatever the hell you want with it, but coming in, paying a bunch of money to Square Enix to gate their game away from other platforms for a time period, I think that's absolutely whack. But that's gonna do it for me. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. Sound off there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.